Hey folks, how's it going? It's gamewebcam, and welcome back to another episode of RoView, the series where we analyze different Roblox games and determine how good or crappy the games are. For this episode, we are going to be looking at the game Split. Now, Split is a game that is made by Ripple Creek. They are the same developers who made the game Silhouette, a game that I've actually played before and actually quite enjoyed. So I wanted to take a look at Split and see how well they did for this game. As always, if you're enjoying what you are watching, please leave a like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified for every single upload that I make to this channel. A few quick things that I want to say before I start this video. This is a RoView, so this is my opinion, so please do not go and send hate to any of the developers that I review in this series. They are human too, they work on games and they enjoy it, so please do not go ahead and send hate for a bad game. Also, spoiler warning, this review does contain spoilers of the game, so if you do not want your experience ruined by this review, please go ahead and play the game yourself before watching this review. I will have a link for the game down in the description. Let's get started. So what is Split? Split is a puzzle game where the underlying mechanic is that you can split your upper and lower body in order to complete different tasks and get past different levels. Some rules that the game establishes early on is that your upper half of your body can easily pick up boxes and throw them around, but you are not allowed to jump with that half of the body. Your legs, on the other hand, do allow you to jump around, but you will have to push boxes around and you don't have the finest degree of control, as we will be seeing in the later levels. The player can reconnect and split their body at any time, but they must have their full body intact in order to complete a level and progress. Now, before we continue talking about Split, I need to briefly talk about Ripple Creek's other game, Silhouette, because throughout this review, I'm going to be making a lot of comparisons to this game, Silhouette, in many of its mechanics and how it executes certain things. Silhouette is a parkour game that involves the use of shadows to determine where your player can safely go, as going outside of the shadows means certain death. The only exception involves getting on an elevated platform. Silhouette brought a new and interesting take on Roblox parkour because no other parkour game has ever thought of utilizing Roblox's lighting engine to create obstacle courses. Of course, it comes at a cost of inaccessibility because you need to be on the higher graphics settings to get the shadow system the game relies on. Also, some of the courses Silhouette offers are quite challenging, which explains why Silhouette has quite a low rating. Silhouette was also one of the first games to practically use a gravity bending mechanic that has been introduced by Egomoose, the owner behind Ripple Creek. The gravity mechanic is open source and you can openly use this mechanic in your games. The mechanic works by allowing you to walk on any sloped surface and the gravity readjusts to ensure you're always standing upright on the material. We will be seeing this mechanic also incorporated in Split, but I will be getting more into that later. Overall, Silhouette brought in a fresh new breath to the parkour scene, and I found it to be a pretty good game. One key difference between Split and Silhouette is that I've always considered Silhouette to be a parkour game. Sure, in the later levels of the game, there are some puzzle-like aspects that the game incorporates, but I never saw the game as a puzzle game. Meanwhile, I see Split as a puzzle game that has parkour aspects to it. There are definitely some levels throughout the game that Ripple Creek added that try too hard to sell the parkour aspect of the game. Honestly, I was a bit annoyed with these levels because I felt like it was trying to say, hey, there's parkour, we're a parkour game too, this game has parkour in it. Did you know that we love parkour? And it honestly just ruined the experience a little bit. Anyways, when going back to the tutorial, there were a few things that I've noticed right away. I noticed that the game has absolutely no music or background ambience, and while this may sound like a nitpick at first, it becomes noticeable when you are sitting back and staring at the game, trying to figure out how to solve a level. On one hand, it may help you think of the solutions, and YouTubers can benefit from this because they know that they won't receive a copyright claim. However, not adding music or some form of audio ambience to the game takes away from the game's immersion. Immersion is something that is incredibly important when making a game because it helps the player envision that they are in the game and helps improve their experience. I mean, try playing Portal with all of the ambience and music completely removed, and you will have a completely different experience when playing the game. I mean, the music and the sound ambience that is made had specific sound designers and music producers behind them. I'm not expecting Ripple Creek to have the budget of like a AAA game studio, but come on, could you just at least generate some Brownian noise in Audacity and just slapped it onto the game? That would have been much more passable as some ambience rather than just pure silence throughout the entire game. In the tutorial, they introduced the gravity bending mechanic, but for the first half of the game, this mechanic is never used, which makes me wonder why they even bothered introducing the mechanic this early on. It isn't until about halfway into the game that the game realizes, oh wait, we haven't been using the gravity bending mechanic this entire time, and then starts using it liberally for the rest of the game. Personally, what I would have done is I wouldn't have introduced the mechanic in the tutorial and would have saved it to when it actually starts being used. When I came across the gravity bending mechanic again, I completely forgot that the game offered this mechanic until I had to die and respawn upside down. Anyways, after completing the tutorial, we start to get more of the actual game, but it starts off pretty easy. The narrator definitely seems to linger his presence more after the tutorial. Speaking of the narrator, he's one of the things that helps give the game a decent personality. The narrator is the primary antagonist of the game, and he is the one who watches over you as you do the puzzles. While you're doing the puzzles, the narrator often insults and degrades you for your sluggish efforts you do on the puzzles, making you look stupid and trying to demotivate you from completing the game. Alright, so the lights went off.
Time and figured that someone forgot to mark it as completed. I mean, who could possibly be that slow? Apparently. It's actually quite impressive in its own way. Anyway, so I'll just leave the lights on overnight and check back on you tomorrow morning. Good luck.
It is obvious that the narrator is inspired by Portal's GLaDOS, as they have striking similarities in their roles and their personality traits. However, the key difference between GLaDOS and the narrator is that we tend to appreciate GLaDOS when she insults the protagonist because not only does she make her jokes subtle, but she also tends to be very crafty and witty when she makes an insult. In addition, GLaDOS's hatred for the protagonist builds up over time and doesn't make it seem too obvious. On the other hand, Split's narrator has absolutely no subtlety when insulting the player. There have only been a few insults that the narrator makes throughout the entire game that can even be comparable to GLaDOS. And even then, I still think GLaDOS would win by a long shot. What I believe the developers were trying to accomplish is to try and make the character as unlikable of a character as possible, as in the late game he also talks about how badly the other employees are treated and how inhumane the company running the Split experiment really is. However, I feel like this writing was completely forced and just came out of nowhere. I personally perceive this as poor writing and improper character development. It's such a shame because if the narrator would have been written a lot better, it really would have helped establish a good storyline and help keep the game entertaining in other ways. Anyways, I'm now going to be having full focus on the levels that the game has to offer. The first few levels of the game are your typical easy levels that pretty much go over the mechanics you just learned in the tutorial. However, what caught me off guard was that in the third level, if you fall down the pit and press the button at the bottom of the pit, the game makes a mockery of you and tells you that you need to reset by basically making a clown face pop up and having clown music play in the game. That is such a troll. I can't believe they actually did that. That's such a troll. I'm not gonna lie, this definitely caught me by surprise, and it was a very witty way of telling the player that they did something wrong. I will actually give them credit here because that was actually pretty funny.
If only the narrator were like this for the rest of the game, though.
A lot of the early levels in the game take advantage of backtracking, considering how easy they tend to be. A ton of games tend to do this in order to pad out runtime, as that is the primary reason for backtracking. However, when games reuse assets or backtrack, they tend to limit how many times they do it so it doesn't seem too obvious. However, with Split, it starts to become noticeable after a few levels, and it gets repetitive quite quickly. Complete this obstacle course, grab the box, and complete the obstacle course again. It becomes a repeating trend that gets incredibly boring over time. I also noticed that a lot of the early levels present a lot of gimmicky concepts that are not ever seen in the game again, such as a teeter-tot balance or a basketball hoop challenge, and it at least gave the game some flavor and variety, but it's obvious that these are just gimmicks and it isn't reflective of how the later levels are going to play out. But to be fair, some of the puzzles that the game offers are pretty clever, such as having to carry a box on top of a top-only barrier and using the box to carry your legs over to the other side. And I kind of like how the game explores a lot that you can do with the mechanic it offers. However, when you go halfway through the game decides to abandon puzzles completely for a few levels. It just gives you straight up parkour. I get that parkour is an aspect of a game, but I felt like the developers tried way too hard to make Split seem like a parkour game when it is not. Overall, the integration of parkour-only levels kind of makes the levels come off as inconsistent, and it kind of takes away from the overall quality of the game. But none of these levels are nearly as bad as the level that follows it. The slider block level is by far the worst level that this game has to offer, and if there was one level that I would remove from this game, this would be the level I would remove. This level defeats the entire purpose of the game. I thought that the game was supposed to explore the split mechanic that the game offers, hence why you call your game Split. I didn't play Split just to play some other dumb puzzle game that has nothing to do with the actual split mechanic other than is a lazy way to control how the pieces move. So as you can tell, I'm still quite frankly upset at this level because this level does literally everything wrong. I could talk more about how god-awful this level is, but we'd be here all day. In the end, this is the only level in the game that I ended up skipping because I honestly couldn't solve these stupid block puzzles for the life of me. Speaking of level skipping, let's talk about the microtransactions that this game has to offer. There are two game passes that Split has to offer, Mirror Mode and Kino Mode, alongside the level skip and donation consumables. Buying the Mirror Mode Game Pass unlocks the Mirror Mode, allowing you to play your favorite levels but flipped. I don't understand it either. Buying the Kino Mode Game Pass just simply allows you to slap a black and white filter on your game, which, if that is something that you're into, then go ahead and do that. The only microtransaction that seems pay to win is the level skip consumable. Now, whenever I come across pay-to-win microtransactions, it usually makes me hate the game straight away because pay-to-win microtransactions ruin the experience for me. However, since Split is a single player game and not a multiplayer game, I will give an exception because you don't necessarily have to purchase this in order to win the game. Again, the only reason why I bought one level skip is because I literally hated everything that the level had to offer, from conception straight up to the execution. Before you start hounding on me, yes, level skips are pretty much textbook pay-to-win microtransactions. Again, they are not required at all in order to beat the game, and the game doesn't aggregate you at all to buy the microtransactions, so I guess that's one good thing. But if you do buy many level skips for the game, that's on you for ruining the experience yourself, so I'll give the level skip consumable a pass. If you are feeling generous, you can donate money to the game in increments of 20, 50, and 100. And that pretty much covers the microtransaction side of things. Following the later levels of the game, the level design starts to get a little bit more consistent, and it seems to now try and utilize the split mechanic to pull off tougher concepts. Again, there are still some concepts that are pretty gimmicky, but unlike the earlier levels, they fit the game's theme a lot better. Now, these levels are much more difficult to complete, with puzzles that are more sophisticated and requiring a lot more problem-solving skills to figure them out. The game also starts using checkpoints a lot less, making mistakes a lot more costly to make. There are 3 late game levels that really stood out to me of the amount of endurance and patience you must have to complete these levels. One of these levels involves 2 boxes that work through a glass barrier. You have to use your upper half of the body to control where these 2 boxes go, and you must navigate your legs through a series of obstacles without falling off. You don't get a checkpoint throughout this entire level until you complete this whole segment. And I know that there are definitely a few people that would definitely rage quit from this. While this level is definitely a bit more on the parkour side, this is a level that utilizes the split mechanic well. It kinda sucks that this was a one level gimmick because this is a concept that could have worked for multiple levels. Granted that earlier and easier versions should have checkpoints. The second level that stood out to me was a level where you have to use only the top half of your body to complete an entire obstacle course from and back just to get one simple box to complete the level. This is the only level in the game where you can quote-unquote jump with your top half. When you jump, your gravity is inverted completely. It's clear that this gimmicky mechanic is inspired by Terry Cavana's 6V, which is a really good game and I highly recommend you check it out. The worst part about this entire level is you have to do this entire obstacle course with no checkpoints. If you die even once, you start all over again. Fortunately, I was good enough to get it in just a few tries. Jesus Christ. Wow, okay. The third level that stood out to me was a level where you have to use your legs to carry the top of your body, using a swingy rope in order to open up gates and get to the other side. This level is incredibly daunting, as halfway through the level, you will actually have to swing the rope far enough, taking advantage of pendulum motion to try and reach a faraway button. You have to do all of this with your legs, which, as I said earlier, doesn't give you the finest control of how you can move boxes. And like the previous 2 levels, you have no checkpoints to work with. This is the penultimate level of the game, and I would say is probably the hardest level in the entire game. It just makes me wonder how many people even got this far in the game and beat it, because this level is quite uncanny with what you need to do in order to accomplish the level. I was even shocked myself when I beat this level. Okay. I am super lucky. I am just super lucky. Oh my god. An honorable mention involves having to press buttons to extrude out portions of a wall, which you must use your legs to jump and climb. The hard part of the level is throwing a box through a barrier and getting it to land on a moving platform, which, because it is reliant on physics, can be a bit of a crapshoot. Great f***ing game. 10 out of 10. Greatest f***ing game ever. Where literally you have to rely on the f***ing physics engine on whether it f***s you over or not. It just f***ing great. The final level in the game involves you riding a ball and having to carefully navigate through a path to grab a box and try to make it to the end. This level has a few checkpoints and is nowhere near as hard as the previous level. On my first attempt, I only died once, and in my second attempt, I actually managed to complete the level without dying once. Funny enough, when you actually beat this level without dying, you get an exclusive voice line from the narrator applauding you for being able to beat the level without dying, but then quickly jabs at you by saying that the previous subject still did it faster. After beating the final level, the game all of a sudden gets easier again. This quote-unquote level that you are taken to cannot be accessed in the level selection menu, so if you want to reach this level again, you will have to complete the final level again to get back to this point. A lot of aspects of this quote-unquote level is very reminiscent of the puzzles that you had to do at the beginning of the game. Honestly, coming across these puzzles again after having to complete some of the hardest levels that the game threw at you is honestly a nice decompressor and gives you an idea of how far you've gone, and I really like how that is demonstrated here. When you get to the end of the corridor, you see a red button, which at the beginning of the game, the narrator tells you to avoid and not press, considering that they get there unwillingly. The narrator quickly hoists the button so it is out of reach and reveals you your cell. There are two options that you can take from this point. The first option you can take is that you can go straight into your cell and end the game. When doing this, the narrator applauds you for your obedience, but then tells you that because the laboratory is short-supplied on test subjects, you will continue to be testing for what seems to be the rest of your days. The game concludes and you get the long stay ending, which is considered to be the bad ending of the game. The other option you could take is to disobey the narrator and try to press the button anyways. In order to reach the red button, you will have to take a box that has been conveniently hidden in the back of your cell, split, put your legs on top of the box, and then use your legs to jump onto the button. The door in the room blasts open, and you can exit from there. Exiting through that door allows you to escape from the laboratory and gets you the freedom ending, which is considered to be the good ending for the game. To be honest, I was a bit disappointed on how easy it was to get the good ending for this game, as I was thinking that the narrator would have taken further measures to ensure that I wouldn't have escaped. But surprisingly, he just lets me go. The map that you are teleported to in the freedom ending is actually a very old ROBLOX map that dates all the way back from 2006 to 2008, with the only change being that the set of building bricks are completely removed. I kinda like the map choice for this game because on the surface it gives you a sense of nostalgia if you do recognize the map. However, this house is located in the middle of nowhere and is very reminiscent of Portal 2's ending. Only one question lingers in your head at this point. Now what? You've obtained full freedom from being controlled, but at the cost of being lonely and having almost no human contact. To be honest, it gives a bittersweet note to this good ending, and I kinda like that. I first came across this game because it was one of the first games that showed up in my recommended, and I will say that ROBLOX did a fine job recommending me this game. I would rate this game a 6 out of 10. While the game's introduction of the split mechanic innovates yet again in the parkour scene like it did with Silhouette, the game's lack of polish, inconsistent level design, and poor storytelling stops this game from achieving its full potential. Again, a lot of the levels contained gimmicky concepts that only last for 1 to 3 levels, and some levels straight up try to genre bend from its puzzle aspect to be pure parkour, and it's this inconsistency that makes a lot of the levels in this game hit or miss. I feel like if the developers were to at least have taken some of the gimmicks present in the game and expand upon them, it could have helped come up with some amazing levels, such as the teeter-totter, the two-way boxes, and other mechanics like this would have made a more solid game. If the narrator were to be less two-dimensional of a character and painted as someone with actual intentions on what they want to do with the split experiment, it would have helped establish a meaningful lore of the game and accomplish something that Portal managed to do. It doesn't take a AAA game studio to come up with good writing and storytelling. There is a lot of good the game does, but a lot of bad it does as well, which is why this game has me split. Thanks for watching. I promise I will be making more RoView videos in the future. I've not forgotten about this series at all, but I also will be working on other videos before I make another RoView, and perhaps it won't have as much depth as this one, just for a nice refresher. I do really enjoy making these RoView videos though, and if you also enjoy watching these RoViews, feel free to hit a like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified for any future uploads that I make to this channel. That's all I really have to say, and take care.